I watched through my kitchen window as Brenda Caldwell, the HOA board member from 3 houses down, walked straight up my driveway at 8 in the morning on a Saturday and unplugged my garden hose from the spigot. She rolled it up like she owned it, tucked it under her arm, and marched back down the street toward her house. I stood there with my coffee cup halfway to my mouth, wondering if I had just witnessed what I thought I witnessed. My name is Nathan Calloway, and I had lived in the Riverside Meadows subdivision in Gilbert, Arizona, for exactly 4 months. The house was perfect, a 3-bedroom ranch with a decent yard and a garage that actually fit my truck. The neighborhood seemed quiet when I moved in last February, and the HOA fees were reasonable compared to other places I had looked at. I should have known that reasonable HOA fees often came with unreasonable HOA board members. I set my coffee down and headed outside, but by the time I got to the end of my driveway, Brenda had already disappeared around the corner. I stood there in my bare feet on the concrete, squinting against the morning sun, trying to process what had just happened. The thing was, I could not figure out why she would take my hose. It was not even a nice hose. I had bought it at Home Depot for $23 because my old one had cracked during the move. When I got back inside, I pulled up the app for my new Ring doorbell camera. I had installed it 2 weeks ago after someone kept leaving passive-aggressive notes on my door about my trash cans being visible from the street for more than 12 hours after pickup. The notes were never signed, but I had a strong suspicion about who was leaving them. I scrolled back through the footage and there it was, crystal clear. Brenda Caldwell, wearing a purple velour tracksuit that looked like it cost more than my monthly car payment, walking up my driveway at exactly 7:52 a.m. She looked around like she was casing the place, then bent down and disconnected my hose from the spigot. She rolled it up with the efficiency of someone who had done this before, and then she walked away with it under her arm. I saved the video and texted my neighbor, Marcus, who lived 2 doors down. Marcus had warned me about Brenda within the first week of me moving in. He said she had been on the HOA board for 6 years and treated the neighborhood like her personal kingdom. The text back came within 30 seconds. "Dude, she took your hose. That's insane even for her. You have proof?" I sent him the video link. My phone rang immediately. "Nathan, this is gold. You need to post this in the neighborhood Facebook group. Everyone needs to see this." "I do not even know if we have a neighborhood Facebook group," I said, walking back to the kitchen to reheat my coffee in the microwave. "Oh, we do. Riverside Meadows Community Watch. It is supposed to be for reporting suspicious activity and coordinating the annual block party, but mostly it is Brenda posting about HOA violations and everyone else complaining about Brenda. This is going to blow up." I hesitated. I was not really a social media person, and I definitely was not the type to start neighborhood drama. But the woman had walked onto my property and stolen my belongings. That crossed a line. "Send me the link to the group," I said. 20 minutes later, I was approved to join the group. It had 247 members, which seemed like a lot considering our subdivision only had about 90 houses. I scrolled through the recent posts. Brenda had posted 3 times in the past week alone. One was about someone's lawn being a 1/4 inch too tall according to HOA guidelines. Another was about a basketball hoop that was apparently 6 inches over the property line. The third was about decorative flags, stating that only American flags were allowed and that seasonal decorative flags violated the community standards. I took a deep breath and created a new post. "Hey everyone, I am Nathan from 4782 Maple Grove Lane. This morning, an HOA board member came onto my property and took my garden hose. I have video evidence. Not sure what the protocol is here, but I would like my hose back. I attached the Ring camera video and hit post. Then I went to take a shower, figuring I would deal with whatever response came later. By the time I got out 15 minutes later, my phone was exploding with notifications. The post had 63 comments and counting. I scrolled through them, my eyes getting wider with each one. OMG, that is Brenda Caldwell. Why am I not surprised? She did the same thing with my garden tools last summer, said they were not allowed to be visible from the street. This is literally theft. You should call the police. Brenda has been terrorizing this neighborhood for years. Finally, someone has proof. I watched her take my daughter's chalk from the driveway once. She said sidewalk chalk violated the paint and exterior maintenance clause. Wait, she took chalk from a kid. The comments kept coming. Person after person shared their own stories about Brenda. She had reported someone for having the wrong shade of beige paint on their shutters. She had called code enforcement on a house that had a vegetable garden in the front yard. She had tried to fine a family for having their garage door open for more than 30 minutes while they cleaned it out. My phone rang. Unknown number with a local area code. Hello, Mr. Calloway, this is Brenda Caldwell from the HOA board. I need you to take down that post immediately. Her voice was sharp and clipped, like a teacher who had caught a student passing notes. You need to return my hose immediately, I said back, keeping my voice level. That hose was in violation of HOA Code 7.3, subsection B, which states that garden hoses must be stored out of sight when not in use. Since it was left connected to your spigot overnight, I confiscated it as per my authority as a board member. I pulled the phone away from my ear and stared at it for a second, then put it back. You stole my property. That is not confiscation, that is theft. And I want it back, or I am filing a police report. You will do no such thing. If you do not remove that defamatory post within the hour, the HOA will begin fining you $500 per day for harassment of a board member. We have zero tolerance policies for this kind of behavior. She hung up before I could respond. I stood in my bedroom, water still dripping from my hair onto my shoulders, and felt anger surge through me. This woman had actually just threatened me for posting a video of her stealing my stuff. I pulled up the neighborhood group again. The post now had over 100 comments. Someone had tagged the other 2 HOA board members. Someone else had mentioned that there was an HOA meeting scheduled for next Thursday evening. Marcus texted again. Dude, you are a legend. People have been waiting for someone to stand up to Brenda for years. Do not take that post down. Another text came through, this one from a number I did not recognize. Hi Nathan, this is Veronica Lawson. I live on Cottonwood Drive. I am also on the HOA board with Brenda. Can we talk? I promise I am not calling to threaten you. I called the number back. Thank you for calling me back, Veronica said. She sounded tired. Listen, I saw your post and the video. What Brenda did was completely out of line and not authorized by the board. I have been trying to rein her in for 2 years now, but she acts like she is the only person with any authority around here. She just called me and threatened to fine me $500 a day if I do not take the post down. Veronica groaned. Of course she did. She cannot do that. That is not how any of this works. The board has to vote on fines, and they have to be for actual violations documented with proper notice. You cannot just fine someone for posting on Facebook, and you definitely cannot confiscate people's property. That is theft. So what do I do? Come to the HOA meeting Thursday night, 7 p.m. at the community center. Bring the video. I will make sure it gets on the agenda. It is time the rest of this neighborhood sees what Brenda has really been doing. I agreed and hung up. Then I screenshot Brenda's threat to fine me and added it to the Facebook post with an update. Just received a call from the board member in the video threatening to fine me $500/day for posting this, not taking it down. The comments section exploded again. By Sunday afternoon, the post had been shared 89 times and had over 300 comments. People I had never met were messaging me with their own Brenda stories. Someone created a Google Doc titled The Brenda Files, where people could document every interaction they had had with her. It was up to 14 pages by Monday morning. On Monday, I took the video to the Gilbert Police Department. The officer who took my report, a younger guy named Officer Hayes, watched the video 3 times. "So she just walked up and took your hose," he said, more statement than question. "Yep." And when I asked for it back, she said she confiscated it for HOA violations. HOAs cannot confiscate property. They can fine you, they can put a lien on your house if you do not pay fines, but they cannot take your stuff. That is theft. He typed something into his computer. Value of the hose: about $23, but it is the principle. I get it. We actually get calls about this HOA a few times a year, usually threats and harassment complaints. This is the first actual theft I have seen, though. He printed something and had me sign it. We will send an officer to her house to retrieve your property and give her a citation. If she refuses to return it, we can pursue charges. She is not going to be happy about this. Officer Hayes gave me a small smile. Sir, people who steal garden hoses rarely are. I left the police station feeling vindicated. Maybe I was taking this too far over a $23 hose, but Brenda had threatened me. She had stolen from me. And based on the Google Doc that was now up to 22 pages, she had been doing stuff like this to people for years. Tuesday afternoon, I got a knock on my door. It was Officer Hayes holding my hose. Miss Caldwell was not pleased, he said, handing it to me. She argued with us for 20 minutes about HOA authority. We explained that HOAs do not supersede state law. She has been cited for petty theft. She can either pay the fine or contest it in court. Thank you, I said, taking the hose. It felt ridiculous to be so happy about getting a cheap garden hose back, but I was. One more thing, Officer Hayes said. She mentioned possibly pursuing a civil suit against you for defamation. I am not a lawyer, but posting a factual video of someone committing a crime is not defamation. You might want to keep that in mind if she contacts you again. After he left, I posted an update in the neighborhood group. Police retrieved my hose. Brenda received a citation for petty theft. Thanks to everyone for the support. The post got 156 reactions in 10 minutes. Wednesday afternoon, I got a letter in my mailbox. It was from a law firm in Scottsdale. My stomach dropped as I opened it. The letter informed me that I was in violation of multiple HOA codes and was being fined a total of $2,300. The violations included failure to store garden hose out of sight, posting defamatory content about an HOA board member, trash cans visible from street after collection day, and vehicles parked in driveway overnight instead of garage. I took pictures of the letter and texted them to Veronica. She called me within 5 minutes. This is harassment, and it is not legally binding. First of all, Brenda cannot issue fines on her own. Second, half of these violations are not even real. There is nothing in our HOA docs about parking in your driveway overnight. And the defamation thing is absurd. I am bringing this to the meeting Thursday. This has gone way too far. Thursday evening, I drove to the community center at 6:45 p.m. The parking lot was already packed. I had to park on the street 2 blocks away. As I walked toward the building, I saw clusters of neighbors talking in urgent, animated voices. Marcus waved me over to where he was standing with 3 other people. "Everyone is here for you, man," he said. "This is the most people I have ever seen at an HOA meeting. Usually it is just Brenda, Veronica, the other board member Doug, and like 5 retirees who have nothing better to do." We walked into the community center together. The main room had about 40 chairs set up, and every single one was full. People were standing along the walls. I estimated there were at least 75 people crammed into a space meant for 50. At the front of the room, behind a folding table, sat 3 people. I recognized Brenda immediately. She was wearing a cream-colored pantsuit and had her hair pulled back so tight it looked painful. Next to her was Veronica, a woman in her early 50s with kind eyes and graying hair. The third person, presumably Doug, was a heavy-set man in his 60s wearing a polo shirt and looking extremely uncomfortable. Brenda banged a gavel on the table. "This meeting will come to order. If you are not a resident of Riverside Meadows, you need to leave immediately." Nobody moved. I said, "If you are not a resident, Brenda, everyone here is a resident," Veronica cut in. "Maybe we should just start the meeting." Brenda's face flushed red, but she consulted a piece of paper in front of her. "Fine. First item of business, approval of last month's meeting minutes." "I move to table the regular agenda," Veronica said. "We have an urgent matter to discuss." "We will follow the proper agenda order," Brenda snapped. Doug cleared his throat. "Actually, I second Veronica's motion. Let's talk about the elephant in the room." Brenda looked like she wanted to argue, but she was outvoted. "Fine. Veronica, what is this urgent matter?" Veronica stood up. "As most of you know, there was an incident this past Saturday where Brenda took property from a resident's home without permission and without board authorization. The resident, Nathan Calloway, is here tonight. Nathan, would you like to address the board?" I had not expected to speak. My palms started sweating, but I stood up, and suddenly 75 pairs of eyes were on me. "I moved here 4 months ago," I started, my voice sounding too loud in my own ears. "Last Saturday morning, I watched Brenda walk up my driveway and take my garden hose. I have video footage of this, which I shared with the community. When I asked for my hose back, she threatened to fine me. When I posted the video, she threatened to fine me $500 a day. I filed a police report, and she was cited for petty theft. Yesterday, I received a letter stating I was being fined $2,300 for various violations, most of which are either not real or are being applied as retaliation." The room erupted. People started shouting questions and comments. "She took my son's bike once. How is this legal?" "Brenda, you need to resign." Brenda stood up, her face now completely red. "That hose was in violation. I have the authority to enforce HOA rules." "You have the authority to document violations and bring them to the board," Veronica shot back. "You do not have the authority to take people's property, and you certainly do not have the authority to issue fines without a board vote." I was protecting property values. If we let people leave hoses out, next thing you know, we will have cars on blocks in front yards. The absurdity of that statement hung in the air. An elderly woman in the 3rd row stood up. "Brenda, you made my granddaughter cry when you took her sidewalk chalk. She was 6 years old. You told her that artistic expression on concrete surfaces was prohibited. What kind of person does that?" Another man stood up. "You reported me to code enforcement for having a vegetable garden. I was growing tomatoes to donate to the food bank. Code enforcement found no violations, but I still had to take time off work to deal with it." One by one, people stood up and shared their stories. The meeting had completely devolved from any structured agenda. This was a community airing its grievances, and Brenda was shrinking in her chair with each new story. Finally, Doug stood up. I have been on this board for 8 years. I am a retired accountant and I mainly handle the finances. I have tried to stay out of the enforcement side of things, but I cannot stay quiet anymore. Brenda, you have abused your position. You have harassed our neighbors. You have made up rules that do not exist in our governing documents. And now you have actually stolen someone's property and gotten a criminal citation for it. I am calling for a vote to remove you from the board immediately. You cannot do that. Brenda stood up so fast her chair fell backward. I have done everything for this neighborhood. I have kept property values high. I have maintained standards. You have terrorized people over garden hoses and sidewalk chalk, Veronica said quietly. That is what you have done. I second Doug's motion. The vote was 2-1. Brenda was removed from the board effective immediately. She gathered her papers with shaking hands, her face a mixture of rage and humiliation. You will all regret this. This neighborhood will fall apart without proper leadership. Your property values will tank. Brenda, just go home, Doug said, not unkindly. She left and the room was silent for a moment. Then someone started clapping, then another person. Within seconds, the entire room was applauding. Veronica held up her hands for quiet. Okay, so we now need to discuss next steps. We need a new board member to fill Brenda's position. We also need to review our governing documents and make sure we are actually following them. And we need to address any outstanding fines or violations that may have been issued improperly. The meeting went on for another 2 hours. A woman named Patricia, who worked as a real estate attorney, volunteered to review all the HOA documents and make sure everything was legally sound. Marcus volunteered to take Brenda's board position temporarily until a proper election could be held. And Veronica moved to void any fines issued in the past 30 days pending a full review. When I finally left the community center at 10:15 p.m., I felt exhausted but relieved. Marcus walked out with me. That was intense, he said. I just wanted my hose back. Yeah, but you did something everyone else was too afraid to do. You stood up to her. You had proof. That video changed everything. We reached our cars. Think she will really let this go? I asked. Marcus shrugged. She does not have a choice. She is off the board. She has a criminal citation, and the entire neighborhood just watched her get voted out. What else can she do? I found out what else she could do on Friday morning when I went outside and discovered that someone had spray painted the word traitor across my garage door in bright red paint. I stared at it for a long moment, then pulled out my phone and checked my Ring camera footage. At 3:17 a.m., a figure in dark clothing and a hood had walked up my driveway and spray painted my garage door. The person had kept their face turned away from the camera, but I could see enough of their build and movements to make an educated guess. I called Officer Hayes again. He came out, took photos of the graffiti and reviewed the footage. Cannot definitively identify who this is from the video, but given the context and timing, we can certainly question Miss Caldwell. How much is this going to cost to fix? I asked, staring at my ruined garage door. Probably a few $100s to repaint. You could file a claim with your homeowner's insurance, but your deductible might be higher than the repair cost. I would document everything, though. If we can prove Miss Caldwell did this, you can pursue restitution. After Officer Hayes left, I posted the new video in the neighborhood group with a caption. Someone spray painted my garage at 3 a.m. Police are investigating. The response was immediate and furious. 3 different neighbors offered to help me repaint the door. 5 others offered to pitch in money for the repair. Someone started a GoFundMe to cover my costs, which I immediately asked them to take down because it felt like too much. Marcus came over with his pressure washer to see if we could remove the paint before it fully cured, but it was already too late. We would have to repaint. Saturday morning, I was at Home Depot buying primer and garage door paint when I ran into Veronica in the paint aisle. "I heard about your garage door," she said. "I am so sorry. This is exactly the kind of behavior we were trying to stop." "Do you really think it was Brenda?" Veronica sighed. "Honestly, yes. She called me at midnight on Thursday screaming about betrayal and how we would all pay for humiliating her. I told her she needed to calm down and accept what happened, but she just kept ranting. I finally had to hang up on her. Should you tell the police about that call?" "Already did. Gave them a statement this morning." We stood there in the paint aisle, both holding paint samples, and I had the absurd thought that this was the weirdest way to get to know my neighbors. "How long has she been like this?" I asked. "It got progressively worse over the years." At first she was just really enthusiastic about maintaining standards. Then it became an obsession. Then it became a power trip. I think she had some stuff going on in her personal life, a divorce a few years back, kids who do not talk to her anymore. She poured all of her energy into controlling the HOA because it was the one place where she had authority. Veronica selected a paint sample and added it to her basket. Does not excuse her behavior, but it explains it a bit. That is almost sad. It is sad. But at some point, you have to take responsibility for your actions. She crossed way too many lines. We walked to the checkout together. Veronica offered to help paint my garage door and I accepted. It felt good to have allies in this situation. Sunday morning, 6 of my neighbors showed up at my house with paintbrushes, rollers, and drop cloths. We had the garage door primed and repainted by noon. Someone brought coffee and donuts. Someone else brought sandwiches for lunch. It felt less like a repair job and more like a block party. While we were cleaning up, a Gilbert police cruiser pulled up to my house. Officer Hayes got out along with another officer. "Mr. Calloway, we wanted to update you on the investigation. We spoke with Miss Caldwell about the vandalism." She denied any involvement, but one of her neighbors reported seeing her leave her house at around 3 a.m. Friday morning and return about 20 minutes later. That neighbor provided a statement. "So, what happens now? We are pursuing charges for criminal damage." Given the ongoing pattern of harassment and the previous theft citation, the prosecutor is taking this seriously. She will likely be arrested and arraigned within the next week. My neighbors, who had all stopped cleaning to listen, broke into spontaneous applause again. I felt weird about celebrating someone being arrested, even someone who had made my life difficult, but I also felt relief. This would finally be over. On Tuesday, Brenda was arrested. The neighborhood group exploded with the news. Some people felt bad for her. Most people felt it was deserved. A few people pointed out that if she had just returned the hose and apologized, none of this would have happened. That same week, Patricia finished reviewing the HOA governing documents. She presented her findings at an emergency board meeting that Wednesday, which I attended along with about 30 other residents. "Okay, so I have gone through all of our HOA docs, our CC and Articus, and our bylaws. Here is what I found." Patricia adjusted her glasses and consulted her notes. First, about 60% of the violations Brenda issued over the past 2 years are not actually violations according to our governing documents. She was making up rules or interpreting existing rules in ways that were never intended. Groans and angry murmurs rippled through the crowd. Second, the process she was using for fines was completely wrong. You cannot fine someone without written notice and a hearing. You definitely cannot fine someone for posting on social media about actual events. Third, and this is important, Board members do not have unilateral authority to confiscate property, enter homes without permission, or harass residents. Everything has to go through proper channels and board votes. So what do we do about all the fines she issued? Someone asked. I recommend the board vote to void any fines issued in the past 2 years where proper procedure was not followed. People should not have to pay penalties for rules that do not exist or were not properly enforced. Veronica made the motion. Doug seconded. Marcus, as the new temporary third board member, voted in favor. The motion passed unanimously. The relief in the room was palpable. Several people started crying. One man stood up and said he had been paying $50 a month for over a year for a violation involving his mailbox being the wrong shade of black. He had repainted the mailbox 3 times trying to get it right, but Brenda kept saying it was still wrong. "Your mailbox is fine," Patricia said. "There is no specification in our documents about shades of black. You can request a refund for those fines." By the end of the meeting, the board had voted to refund approximately $18,000 in improper fines issued over the past 2 years. They also voted to hire a professional property management company to handle HOA enforcement going forward, taking that power away from individual board members. Brenda's arraignment was scheduled for the following Monday. I took the morning off work to attend. Marcus came with me for moral support. The courthouse in downtown Gilbert was busy. We found the right courtroom and sat in the back. When Brenda was brought in, she looked smaller than I remembered. She was wearing a navy blue dress and looked exhausted. The judge reviewed the charges: petty theft and criminal damage. Brenda's lawyer, a tired-looking public defender, argued for leniency given her lack of prior criminal record. The prosecutor pointed out the pattern of harassment and abuse of authority. The judge set bail at $2,000 and scheduled a hearing for 3 weeks out. Brenda posted bail and left without looking at anyone. Outside the courthouse, the prosecutor, a sharp woman in her 40s named Miss Richardson, came over to talk to me. "Mr. Calloway, I wanted to thank you for documenting everything so thoroughly. The video evidence made this case very straightforward. We do not often see HOA disputes escalate to criminal charges, but theft is theft, and vandalism is vandalism." "What do you think will happen?" I asked. "Given her lack of priors, she will probably get probation, community service, and restitution. But it will be on her record, and if she violates probation or continues to harass residents, she will face jail time." Miss Richardson closed her briefcase. "Between you and me, we have been getting complaints about this particular HOA for years. It is good to see the community finally standing up." The hearing 3 weeks later was anticlimactic. Brenda pleaded no contest to both charges. She was sentenced to 2 years of probation, 100 hours of community service, and ordered to pay restitution for my hose and garage door repair. The judge also issued a restraining order prohibiting her from contacting me or coming within 100 yards of my property. I thought that would be the end of it, but there was one more twist. 2 days after the sentencing, I got a call from Veronica. "You are not going to believe this. Brenda is selling her house and moving. She listed it this morning." Wow, I guess that makes sense. She probably cannot stand living here after everything that happened. Yeah, but here is the thing. She owes the HOA $4,200 in unpaid dues and assessment fees. She has not paid in over a year. She kept saying she was exempt because she was on the board, but that was never true. The board is discussing putting a lien on her property so we can collect before she sells. Can you do that? Absolutely. It is standard procedure for unpaid HOA dues. We have been letting it slide because, well, she was on the board and it was awkward. but she is not on the board anymore, and she owes money just like anyone else would. The lien was filed the following week. Brenda's house sale could not go through until she paid her outstanding balance to the HOA. According to Marcus, who heard it from someone who heard it from someone else, Brenda was furious and tried to argue that the dues were invalid, but her real estate attorney told her she had no case. She paid the $4,200. Her house sold 3 weeks later to a young couple with a toddler. I met them when they came to look at the neighborhood before closing. They seemed nice, and I made sure to mention that the HOA was under new management and much more reasonable now. Through all of this, life in Riverside Meadows had actually gotten better. The new property management company was efficient and fair. They sent out a newsletter explaining all the actual HOA rules and clarifying which of the old violations people had been worried about were not actually violations at all. The community Facebook group became less of a complaint forum and more of an actual community space where people shared recommendations and organized events. Marcus officially ran for the open board position in the HOA election 2 months later and won easily. He immediately pushed for revisions to the HOA governing documents to add more oversight and prevent any single board member from having too much authority. I kept my garden hose exactly where it was, connected to my spigot. Nobody said a word about it. One Saturday afternoon, about 4 months after all of this started, I was in my front yard planting some new shrubs when the new neighbors from Brenda's old house walked by with their toddler. We chatted for a bit, and they mentioned they had found a bunch of files in the garage when they moved in. Files about what? I asked. HOA stuff. Notes about violations, photos of people's houses, logs of who was coming and going. It was kind of creepy, honestly. We threw most of it away, but I kept a few things because I thought people might want to know she had been documenting them. They brought over a box later that day. Inside were dozens of folders, each labeled with an address. I found my own folder, which was surprisingly thick considering I had only lived there for a few months. Inside were photos of my house taken from the street, notes about my trash can positioning, documentation of my car being in the driveway at various times, and even a log of when I came and went from my house. It was deeply unsettling. I called Veronica immediately. She came over with Patricia, the attorney, and they went through the box together. "This is surveillance," Patricia said grimly. "I mean, it is legal to take photos from public spaces, but this level of documentation borders on stalking. Look, she has notes about people's work schedules, their visitors, their daily routines. We found files on 43 different households. Each one contained varying levels of documentation, but all of them were invasive. We need to notify these people," Veronica said. "They have a right to know they were being monitored like this." We decided to bring it up at the next HOA meeting. When people saw their files, the reaction ranged from shocked to outraged. Several people talked about how violated they felt. One woman discovered that Brenda had been photographing her teenage daughter coming and going from the house, which was especially disturbing. The community decided to document everything and submit it to the police as evidence of Brenda's ongoing harassment patterns. It would be added to her probation file. If she violated probation in any way, this would be part of the consideration for sentencing. I also learned something interesting from those files. In my folder, there were notes dating back to before I had even moved in. Brenda had apparently looked up my social media profiles, found information about my job and my previous address, and had written notes assessing whether I would be a compliant resident or a problem resident. She had flagged me as a potential problem because I had posted photos of a pride flag at my old apartment. The whole thing was unhinged. By the time summer rolled around, things had finally settled into a new normal. The annual neighborhood block party in June was the best attended in years. People who had been keeping to themselves out of fear of HOA retaliation were suddenly social again. Kids were drawing on sidewalks with chalk. Basketball hoops appeared in driveways. Someone planted a whole front yard full of vegetables, and nobody said a word. I became friendly with a lot of my neighbors through all of this. Marcus and I started a tradition of grilling out together on Sunday afternoons. Veronica invited me to join a neighborhood book club, which I politely declined because I am not really a book club person, but I appreciated the invitation. The young couple who bought Brenda's house integrated into the neighborhood quickly. Their toddler became the unofficial mascot of the block, and people would stop by to say hi to him when they walked their dogs. I did see Brenda one more time. I was at the grocery store in late July when I turned down the cereal aisle, and there she was, staring at boxes of cornflakes. She looked older than I remembered and tired. When she saw me, her expression hardened for a moment. We just stood there. Then I nodded politely and walked past her to grab the oatmeal I needed. I did not owe her conversation or confrontation. What happened had happened, and everyone had moved on. When I glanced back, she was still standing there, still staring at cereal boxes. In August, I got a notice that Brenda had successfully completed her probation requirements early due to good behavior. She had done her community service hours at a local food bank and had paid all her restitution and fines. According to Marcus, who kept tabs on this stuff, she had moved to an apartment in Mesa and had a job at a call center. Part of me felt bad for how everything had turned out for her. But another part of me remembered that toddler crying about her sidewalk chalk, and that man growing tomatoes for the food bank getting reported to code enforcement, and my own garage door covered in red spray paint. She had created this situation herself through years of escalating behavior. The HOA board, now consisting of Veronica, Doug, Marcus, and 2 newly elected members, had transformed how the association functioned. They established clear processes for everything, created an appeals system for violations, and began hosting quarterly community forums where residents could voice concerns in a structured environment. Property values did not tank, as Brenda had predicted. If anything, they went up slightly because people actually wanted to live in a neighborhood that was not run like an authoritarian regime. My Ring doorbell camera stayed up, though now I mostly used it to see when packages arrived. Every once in a while, I would scroll back through the saved videos from that morning in early June when Brenda walked up my driveway and took my hose. It seemed like such a small thing to have caused such a huge chain of events. A $23 garden hose from Home Depot had brought down a tyrant, exposed years of harassment, united a community, and fundamentally changed how an entire neighborhood functioned. I kept the hose, by the way. Even after I eventually needed to replace it because it wore out, I kept the original one in my garage. It felt important somehow, like a weird historical artifact. The neighborhood started a tradition after everything settled down. Every June, on the anniversary of what people jokingly called the Great Hose Incident, we had a community gathering. It was partly celebration, partly reminder of what happens when people stay silent about abuse of power, and partly just an excuse to grill hot dogs and hang out with neighbors. At the first anniversary gathering, someone gave me a gift. It was a garden hose mounted on a plaque with a little plate that read, "In recognition of standing up for what is right, even when it is just about a hose. Riverside Meadows Community." I hung it in my garage where it remains to this day. Life went on. The neighborhood continued to thrive under reasonable leadership. New families moved in and were welcomed warmly. The kids played in the streets. People's houses reflected their personalities rather than one person's rigid vision of uniformity. I learned a lot through this experience. I learned that documentation matters, that community support matters, and that sometimes standing up to bullies is as simple as refusing to let them take your garden hose without consequences. I also learned that HOAs are not inherently bad. They can be useful for maintaining common areas, organizing community events, and preserving property values. But they require oversight, transparency, and people who understand that rules exist to serve the community, not the other way around. About 18 months after everything happened, I got a letter in the mail. It was from Brenda. Inside was a short handwritten note. "Mr. Calloway, I know you probably do not want to hear from me, and I am not writing this expecting forgiveness. I have spent the past year in therapy trying to understand why I acted the way I did. My therapist says I was using control over the HOA as a way to cope with feeling powerless in other areas of my life. That does not excuse what I did to you and others in the neighborhood. I was wrong. I caused harm. I am sorry. I am working on being a better person, though I know that probably does not matter much to you. I just wanted you to know that I recognize what I did was unacceptable. I hope you and the neighborhood are doing well. Brenda Caldwell." I read the letter 3 times, then showed it to Marcus when he came over for our Sunday grilling session. "What are you going to do?" he asked, flipping burgers on my grill. "Nothing, I guess. I mean, it is good that she is getting help and taking responsibility. But I do not need to respond or have a relationship with her or anything. That is fair." I folded the letter and put it in a drawer. Closure does not always require response. Sometimes it is enough to know that someone recognized their wrongs and was working to change. The neighborhood continued to evolve. We added a community garden in one of the common areas where people could grow vegetables together. We organized a neighborhood watch program that was actually about safety rather than policing people's lawn heights. We started a tool library where people could borrow equipment instead of everyone having to buy their own. These were the things that actually built community and maintained property values. Not measuring grass height with rulers or confiscating garden hoses or harassing people about mailbox colors. I eventually became friendly enough with my neighbors that when I went out of town for work, 3 different people offered to water my plants and collect my mail. My hose remained connected to my spigot the entire time I was gone, and nobody touched it. 2 years after the incident, I attended a city council meeting where HOA regulations were being discussed. Several people from Riverside Meadows spoke about our experience and advocated for better oversight of HOA boards and clearer guidelines about board member authority. Our testimony, along with that from other neighborhoods with similar issues, contributed to the passage of new county regulations that required HOA board members to undergo training and established clearer complaint procedures for residents. It felt good to turn our negative experience into something that might help other people in other neighborhoods avoid similar situations. One evening, I was sitting on my front porch with a beer, watching the sunset and listening to kids playing basketball down the street. My neighbor's dog was barking happily in their backyard. Someone was grilling and the smell of barbecue drifted through the air. Wind chimes tinkled from 3 different houses. This was what a neighborhood was supposed to feel like. Safe, comfortable, alive. My phone buzzed with a notification from the Riverside Meadows Community Watch Facebook group. Someone had posted a photo of a rainbow visible over the subdivision after a brief afternoon rain. 37 people had already liked it, and commented with their own photos from different angles. I thought about how different things could have been if I had just let Brenda take my hose and not said anything. If I had been too intimidated to post the video or file a police report. If I had just accepted the harassment and fines because fighting back seemed too difficult. But I had documentation. I had proof. And when I shared it, I discovered I was not alone. Dozens of other people had their own stories, their own evidence, their own frustrations. Together, we made change happen. The famous Margaret Mead quote came to mind. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. In this case, it was not the world. It was just a subdivision in Gilbert, Arizona. But for the 247 families who lived here, it made all the difference. I finished my beer and went inside to make dinner. Through my kitchen window, I could see my garden hose, still connected to the spigot, coiled neatly against the side of the house. Right where it belonged. Right where it would stay. The next morning, I got an email from the HOA newsletter. The board was organizing a community yard sale for next month and was looking for volunteers to help coordinate. I signed up. This was my neighborhood now, and I wanted to be part of making it even better. Life had returned to normal, but it was a better normal than before. A normal where people felt safe to express themselves, to make minor, harmless choices about their own properties, to not live in constant fear of arbitrary enforcement of imaginary rules. As I left for work, I waved to 3 different neighbors. All of them waved back. One of them yelled that they had extra tomatoes from their garden if I wanted any. I said yes and made a mental note to stop by after work. This was community. Not perfectly manicured lawns maintained through fear and harassment, but actual human connection and mutual support. It had taken a confrontation over a stolen garden hose to get here, but we had arrived at a better place. And every time I used that hose to water my plants, I remembered that standing up for yourself, even over small things, matters. Because it is never really about the hose. It is about dignity, respect, and the right to live peacefully in your own home without someone else on a power trip making your life miserable. The story of Brenda and the hose became neighborhood legend. New residents would hear about it during their welcome tours. Kids who had not even been born when it happened would hear their parents reference, remember, when that HOA lady stole Nathan's hose. During dinner conversations, it became a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked authority and a reminder of the importance of community solidarity. But more than that, it became a story about how ordinary people, armed with nothing more than a doorbell camera and the willingness to speak up, can create real change. Years from now, I imagine I will still be living in this house in Riverside Meadows. I will have replaced that hose many times over, but I will keep the original one, mounted on its plaque in my garage, as a reminder of that summer when everything changed, because one person took something that did not belong to them, and a whole community decided enough was enough. Sometimes the most important stands we take are over the smallest things. A hose, a piece of chalk, a vegetable garden. These tiny acts of theft and tyranny, when left unchallenged, add up to create environments where people feel powerless and afraid. But when someone finally says no, when someone finally demands accountability, when someone finally has proof that cannot be denied, that is when real change becomes possible. I never expected to be that person. I just wanted my hose back. But life has a funny way of putting us in situations where we have to choose between accepting injustice or fighting back. Even when fighting back over something as ridiculous as a garden hose feels absurd, I am glad I fought back. I am glad I had that Ring camera. I am glad I posted the video. I am glad the community rallied together. And I am especially glad that we created a better neighborhood out of the ashes of one person's need to control everyone around her. The sun set over Riverside Meadows on another peaceful evening. Kids were still playing in the streets. Dogs were still barking. Wind chimes were still tinkling. And my garden hose was still exactly where it should be, connected to my spigot, ready to water my plants whenever I needed it. That is how the story ends. Not with drama or confrontation, but with ordinary life in a neighborhood that learned to be better, to do better, and to stand together against those who abuse their power. And it all started with one woman taking one hose, not knowing that this time someone was watching, someone was recording, and someone was finally going to say enough is enough.